Well, everyone, time to go ahead and talk about another Samsung Galaxy phone that came out a few years ago, which is the Samsung Galaxy Note 10. Now, this is one of those devices that I think is still a very good device in a lot of ways. It's really only gotten better since the first day it came out. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but I still think it's a pretty decent phone all around. It's pretty much up there with like a Samsung Galaxy S10, even though I think the S10 may be a better phone in every single dimension. Now, if you want to pick up one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the front of this device, you can see that we still have that 6.3-inch dynamic AMOLED display, and it's a very good panel for a 1080p panel. To be honest, at that time when this phone first came out, I was kind of 50-50. I was like, okay, it doesn't really look that great, but over time, like, it's definitely gotten, but it hasn't gotten better, but I think my image of it has gotten better because most panels coming out nowadays are 1080p panels, and this is a pretty decent 1080p panel for sure. You have that hole punch display with that centered hole punch, which is pretty much on all Samsung Galaxy phones now, and this thing is a good looking display for sure. Fingerprint sensor in the display as well, and overall the front of this phone looks very, very good. You do have that USB Type-C port on the bottom, and you have that S Pen as well, which we all know is a very good feature for most of these Samsung devices. You have that capability of just using the stylus as essentially more than a stylus. Like, it has a lot of capability, and that is one of this phone, like I mentioned, is one of this device's biggest assets for sure. So beyond that, that is something that I really do like about this phone's panel. And the bottom of this device, on the back, you do have that glass back, which, as I mentioned before, and I'll keep mentioning, is again one of my favorite things about this phone, mostly because a lot of phones nowadays are coming out with plastic backs, including the Galaxy S10 and even the Note 20. The Note 10 had that standard glass back, which is something I really did like from this phone, and you had that triple camera setup as well, which we'll get into in a second. Another major thing I want to hit on, this phone had wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, which was a really good feature in and of itself, but this phone also had only one storage variant, so it only had a 256 gig variant and no micro SD card or anything like that, so you're really only getting one variant of this device. Maybe not a big deal to a lot of people, but it is kind of an annoyance to some. Now, hitting on the camera, this phone does have that triple camera setup on the back. It has a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 16 megapixel ultra wide sensor. And for sure, I think this camera still holds up extremely well. I really did like this specific phone's camera at the time when it came out, and even now, it still looks and performs extremely well. Anytime I pick up this phone, whenever I compared it to any other device, it gets the job done, and I think that was, again, one of this phone's biggest strong suit was the camera. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. It did have a couple issues here and there, but for the most part, I think it was a pretty good phone for sure. Now, the quality of this camera is great. The microphone quality, I think, was really good as well. You had, again, that triple camera setup, so wide, telephoto, ultra wide. You can zoom in a lot, zoom out a lot, and have a pretty decent wide camera lens as well. You can do 4K at 60 on this phone, which was really, really cool. No 8K. That didn't come out until the S20 a couple months later, but I still think the back camera of this thing is great. The front camera with its 10 megapixel sensor, again, 4K at 60, another pretty big asset for this device. It still looks very good. Again, having that 4K at 60 on the front is one of my favorite things about any phone that comes out, and I think it's a very good single lens as well. So overall, I think this camera is a thumbs up. I love it a lot, and throughout time, I think it's really only gotten better, especially since One UI 3 and One UI 2.5 with all those extra camera features. So again, one of my favorite things about this phone for sure. Now, hitting on some other things that may be good, may be bad, depending on how you look at it. This phone, software-wise, when it first came out, actually got an improvement in the software lifecycle. So originally it was going to end off, I think, this year, but it did get an extra year of software updates, which I think is really awesome. It also got an extra year of security updates as well. So we're really just getting an improvement on the whole entire software lifecycle, which, as I mentioned before, is one of my favorite things about this phone. Having that type of capability of just constantly getting improvements in the software lifecycle is my favorite thing about Samsung right now. Within the last year, they've really been taking an initiative to improving the lifecycle, and it really started with one of these devices, because from the Galaxy S10 onwards, we're getting that improvement. So I think that's really awesome. Now, One UI 3 or One UI in general, it depends on how you look at it. Do you like it or not? I think most people are indifferent about it, becoming more of a fan of it throughout time. I just wish they stuck to stock Android one way or another, but there's really nothing we can do about it anymore. Now this thing does also have a 3500 mAh battery. Throughout time though, this thing has gotten older and older, so batteries degrade over time, but regardless, I think this phone's battery life is very good, especially because it has a 1080p panel, and the chipset inside of it really isn't even that, cumbersome for the performance in terms of, scraping it from the battery life. So I think this phone's battery life is still pretty decent, and I think is a very good thing that it has the wireless charging and reverse wireless charging as well. So I think overall, thumbs up for me for sure. Now ending it off with the performance, this device does have that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset and octa-core CPU, and again, only one model of this phone with 8 gigs of RAM, and as I mentioned before, I think this is one of my favorite things about this phone. The performance of this phone is still extremely solid. Now let me break it down to you pretty much like this. For basic tasks, as I've always mentioned, and I'll continue to mention it like this phone's performance is going to be up there with a lot of phones, that have ever come out in terms of a performance standpoint for the basic tasks. Again, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to have some issues here and there, but I think for a majority of people out there, no matter what you're going to do, the performance for the basic things like Snapchat, Instagram, this and that, you're going to have a really good time with it. And I think that is something that's very, very worthwhile to mention in my opinion. Now, taking a step further, if you're somebody who wants to go ahead and go up to like more intense things, maybe multitasking between a ton of, heavy apps, maybe video editing with a 4K footage and all this other crazy stuff, you're also going to have a pretty decent time with it. I think the only thing that's really going to limit it shouldn't be this way, but the RAM management of this phone was a little iffy, and I think it mostly has to do with the software. These Samsung phones need a lot of RAM in order to be kind of comparable to maybe like a Pixel device with stock Android that maybe has like less RAM, and this happens all the time. Every year I see it happen every year, time and time again. You'll have a Samsung phone that has like 8 gigs of RAM, a Pixel that'll have 6, and sometimes the Pixels are able to kind of go over the specific Samsung device. And again, it's not perfect, it does come here and there, but it is something to kind of keep in mind. So I think the overall performance of the Note 10 is still really good. I think you're going to have a really good time with this phone. Again, it's not perfect, but I think for a majority of people out there, it gets the job done. And I think if you're trying to use a phone for really any purpose in terms of a performance standpoint, you're going to have a really good performance set on the Samsung Galaxy Note 10. So that pretty much covers it up there. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and buy a Samsung Galaxy Note 10 in 2021? Well, this is pretty much what I'll tell you. I think the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 is a very solid pickup in 2021. It's only gotten cheaper over time, which is another huge asset of this phone. And from there, it's only going to get cheaper from this point onwards, but it's a very good phone for sure. Starting off, the front panel, like I mentioned, is beautiful. You have that S Pen, which is really, really good. USB-C with Samsung DeX, that's a humongous feature in and of itself. You're getting a very good camera set on this phone. Beautiful front camera, very good back camera still. There's really no problems with it there. You're getting wireless and reverse wireless charging with a pretty good sized battery life. Those things are huge assets, and as I mentioned before, those are things that a majority of people will look at and compare to other phones that have just came out and be like, wow, this phone still doesn't have this type of feature, but the Note 10 from 2019 has it. That's very strange. This phone has that capability, which I'm really happy about. The performance is great. The software lifecycle has been improved, even though it's not perfect. It has been improved, so I give some credit there. And I think this phone is still worth it. I think the only phone I would recommend above this in this type of caliber is something like a Galaxy S10 or an S10 Plus, mostly because that thing does have a micro SD card slot. Beyond that, those phones are relatively around the same, but I think the Note 10 is still a very good phone for sure. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'd mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.